Welcome to our actually final study or final session of studying 20 Days, the Way of the Bodhisattva, with you could say, summary by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So we'll begin with the opening chants. Somebody very kindly texted me saying, "Don't forget the opening chants today." So, abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion, or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop, or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning, or a cloud, so should one consider all compounded things. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So we're now concluding this study, the Way of the Bodhisattva, and we could say the entire Way of the Bodhisattva can be summed up in that one line that we have here in the development of bodhicitta, together with the refuge, where it says, through the merit of practicing generosity and so on. Generosity is the first of the 6 paramitas, and so on refers to all the others. And in fact, this is then the subject matter of the Way of the Bodhisattva. And it is synonymous with the practice of the Mahayana. So that one line and those 3 words, and so on, that refers to the Mahayana, generosity and so on. So we generate that attitude, and that's always not as something that is, you could say, particular to Buddhists, but something that has universal relevance in terms of a project, and also our field of research, our field of action is not limited to some Buddhist realm, but our field of action, our field of insight, our field of compassion and activity for others is not reserved in any way. There's not a single moment where we can't practice this, and not a single being that's not included in this. So with the virtue that we've accumulated here, we dedicate it. Dedication is such a profound practice, because without dedication, essentially we could say our spiritual practice gets lost. We could have some good karma, but that actually only lasts as long as it is exactly that, karma. As long as we've set something in motion, it will definitely, in the case of studying something like this, it will definitely have a value. But the moment that we dedicate it, then it's no longer just something that we've left, you could say, undetermined. It's something that all of a sudden has direction in terms of something that is unconditional. The moment that we dedicate, we're essentially taking this virtue and channeling it, investing it in the ultimate nature of reality. So that's where this greatness of mind that we're cultivating through the practice of the Bodhisattva, we're not doing that as something that is, you could say, extraneous or external to ourselves. It is us doing what really is, you could say, like my dear friend Surya Dasi says, he says, Buddha is as Buddha does. There you go. Mama couldn't have said it better. Buddha is as Buddha does. And yes, we are aligning ourselves with we are aligning ourselves with this enlightened disposition. In some way, you could say we're imitating, but it's a bit more than imitating because it is alignment. It's becoming what we truly are. So in that sense, it's a very real and honest endeavor. It's not introducing some artificial behavior in terms of trying to be nice people when we're not nice people, or we're angry or whatever. It's not, again, nothing to do with this kind of passive aggressive, contrived practice. It is really about us giving ourselves a break and being true to what is actually there and what really is also what truly benefits the world around us. But the thing about the path is, as long as we're still on the path, we're still thinking, I am doing something. And eventually the Bodhisattva lets go of that notion. Of course, it persists until enlightenment, but there is, of course, as the path progresses, less and less self-consciousness around being there for others. And as such, then ultimately the Bodhisattva doesn't think, I am doing something wonderful for others. There's not this, what we call the threefold concept of the threefold circle of duality, korsam, which is the notion of subject, object, and action, that there is somebody doing something for somebody. And that's where the Bodhisattva is free from that. But until we are completely free from that, then there is still some notion, I did something. And that's where the, you could say, as long as there is still the sense, I'm doing this for others, there are strings attached. There's a sense of self-consciousness, and also sometimes there's, unfortunately, there's this, and this is something that happens a lot in this world, that we think others owe us. I've been so nice to you. Why aren't you nice to me? I gave you that. You owe me. You know, that sort of thing. I've helped out a lot. Now it's time they help me. That sort of thing. So that's where there's strings attached. And the less there is of that, the more beautiful it is. But as long as we have that, then the second best we can do is dedication. That's where we just think, okay, I did something wonderful here. I'm not going to keep that as a sort of what is it, a paper of credit or debit that somebody owes us something. We're not going to keep it like that. Rather, we give it away. So that's something very beautiful. We do something good, and we give it away. And that's dedication. So the 10th chapter here of the Way of the Bodhisattva is an entire chapter dedicated to that. You know, at the end we chant these lines: as long as the space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. Of course, there's many different English translations of that, but this is taken from this 10th chapter. So His Holiness says the final chapter of the Bodhicharya Avatara is the dedication of merit for the benefit of all beings. So Shantideva says, by all the virtue I have now amassed by composition of this book, which speaks of entry to the Bodhisattva way, may every being tread the path to Buddhahood. May beings everywhere who suffer torment in their minds and bodies have, by virtue of my merit, joy and happiness in boundless measure. As long as they may linger in samsara, may their joy be undiminished. May they taste of unsurpassed beatitude in constant and unbroken continuity. So Shantideva is essentially aspiring that through essentially speaking what he has just presented, that this may lead all beings to enlightenment through the virtue of that. And he aspires, may beings who suffer, may they be free from happiness. May they be free from suffering and have happiness, and do so by the value of what he has composed here, by virtue of my merit. And aspire that as long as sentient beings are not free, then within that temporal condition of duality, that temporary condition of confusion, that they may have happiness, and that they ultimately may attain awakening. The last two lines will then be referred to awakening. So the first two, relative temporary happiness, the last two lines, ultimate happiness. So His Holiness said, and this is just then a few words really at the end, and His Holiness really has summarized this book, you could say, in a very brief way. But at the same time, we're so fortunate because we might not have time to go through all of it, or the commentary, which is substantial. It's definitely worth studying, but it is substantial. So we have something like this, a commentary that sums up these points. Is so valuable. But it is, you could say, a brief summary of this great work. So His Holiness says, on this last day, I would like to thank you all for coming so far to attend these teachings. I would like to have given a more detailed commentary on the 9th chapter, the wisdom chapter, but there has not been enough time. However, this provides a good reason for coming back to France, and I'm determined to return so that we can spend a week studying only the 9th chapter. So His Holiness came to France in the, I think, the early 90s? It would have been early 90s. And then he returned later, like it says here in the footnote. His Holiness did indeed teach the 9th chapter of the Bodhisattva to a large audience in November 1993 at the Institut Varjogini in Laveur. A translation of his commentary is in the course of preparation. He based his teaching on two detailed commentaries by Khenpo Kunsang Palden and Minyak Kunsang Sonam. And this teaching on the that we looked at too was also based on the commentaries from these two masters. These two commentaries have been translated at his express wish under the title Wisdom Two Buddhist Commentaries, translated by the Padmakara Translation Group. Paysac Le Moustier, France, Padmakara, 1993. And this then you have this text, Wisdom Two Buddhist Commentaries. So he says, all of you here, spiritual friends with a genuine interest in the teaching of Buddha, please study and practice as much as you can. The basic knowledge and understanding you have gained on the subject of emptiness will make your practice much easier. This understanding of emptiness will be much more powerful if it is founded on the practice of altruism. As Shantideva, who wrote the Bodhicharyottara, primarily as a manual for practitioners rather than as a theoretical treatise, we should do our best to apply these teachings on unselfishness. Living for others is of immense importance for all of us, whatever our beliefs. So, particularly on the topic of emptiness, it's probably quite helpful if we understand emptiness as a greater degree of openness. We fixate in terms of ourselves and the perceptions of our world, and greater openness is the practice, or you could say that's the application of emptiness. But the more we analyze and we can see the solidity that we normally are caught by is actually not based on anything other than just our projections and our habitual attachment to these projections. The more we can see that, then the emptiness is not just sort of a strange mystical phenomenon, but it's more just an openness, a relaxed relationship to our experience. So it's nothing to do with, gosh, it was actually a really good quote I came across from Venerable Kaligranja. There's nothing, when we talk about emptiness, we're not talking about some profound mystical experience. It's about us beginning to be more aware of the nature of things. And also that's where we can't say, oh, I can't understand emptiness, because that's an experience. that will come one day. That's not true. Emptiness is when we begin to dismantle, deconstruct our assumptions. It's where we begin to say, can I really judge that person? Anytime we actually question something about our beliefs, that's where we're entering into the domain of emptiness. Of course, the complete realization of emptiness, yes, that's the scope of great beings and bodhisattvas and what have you. And that continues to develop until perfect enlightenment. So sure. So yes, we can talk about it. We can say, may I realize emptiness? May I realize the lack of self completely? But until now, we can begin to investigate the lack of solidity around our assumptions. This leads to greater openness, greater tolerance, greater patience, and greater joy in our interaction with the world. There's a great doco that's circulating about Charlie Rinpoche. And at the opening of this doco, it says, the meaning of this is from Charlie Rinpoche. The meaning of life cannot be found by constructing all kinds of metaphysical and transcendental concepts, but rather by trying to become more in touch with our own existence. So what we're doing with the cultivation of bodhicitta, the insight into emptiness, is understanding reality more, and with that comes a greater sense of and a greater ability to be connected with others, to be connected with the world, to not resent our reality, but to be more at ease with our reality, less prone to censorship and fussiness, opinionatedness, and so forth. A greater understanding of what happens with the world around us and also what happens with the people in the world around us. And this all comes down to what we here refer to as unselfishness. And this point, living for others, is of immense importance for us all, whatever our beliefs. This is universal. This is phenomenology. This is not Buddhist belief. It's not like Buddhists, they believe you'll be happier when you're compassionate. Well, yes, they believe that for a reason. Just like scientists, they will believe that water boils at a certain degree. But is it really belief, or is it just a fact that we can ascertain, we can verify? And that's where what we're talking about here is verifiable, and it's universal. Living for others is of immense importance for all of us, whatever our beliefs. So someone says, we're here on this planet, as it were, as tourists. None of us can live here forever. The longest we might live is 100 years. So while we're here, we should try to have a good heart and to make something positive and useful of our lives. Whether we live just a few years or a whole century, it would be truly regrettable and sad if we were to spend that time aggravating the problems that afflict other people, animals, and the environment. The most important thing is to be a good human being. I think we all understand that, but it's very, you could say, it's so nice that we have someone like His Holiness saying this. It's like Matthew Ricard in this talk about Dilbu, he says, you know, someone can say that things are impermanent, but when it comes from a great teacher, he's referring to Dilbu, when it comes from a great teacher, such statements, they carry incredible weight. So when we have this from His Holiness, you know, we should, he says the most important thing, we should, oh, what is it His Holiness says? It is so important. You know, we should pay attention to be a good human being. And again, this could be banal, but at the same time, the universality of it and the reality of it, this is something that we all feel in our hearts and our being, what that means. So to make that a priority. His Holiness says, I have noticed some old friends here among you, Western Buddhist monks and nuns who have been practicing keeping vows of ordination for more than 15 years, some as long as 20 years. You are almost elders of the Sangha. Well, I think they are actually. If you're ordained for more than 15 years, I think you are an elder. Yeah. Stavira. Neten. I've noticed from your posture and gaze that while you're listening to the teachings, you are fully concentrated on the subject. This is very pleasing, and I hope you will continue so that you attain genuine bodhicitta and the realization of emptiness. This is possible through inner transformation. One day, you will become bodhisattvas in reality. So whatever obstacles there are, however long it takes, do not get discouraged. And in the meanwhile, I would like to thank you very much. Here in Dordogne, there are Nyingma and Kagyu Buddhist centers, and elsewhere in France, there are Gelug and Sakya centers. I'm very pleased to see that these different traditions maintain a strong spirit of harmony among themselves, with no sectarian prejudice. Please continue to cultivate that spirit. This is actually true. I've lived in Dordogne and lived in France for 10 years, and there is actually there's a very nice spirit and respect among the different traditions, and this prevails. And I would also say this also prevails in the Buddhist tradition in Tibet, even though, of course, there has been sometimes a bit of bickering between the traditions. So then His Holiness says, I would like to say a few words concerning the Tibetan cause. As a Buddhist monk, I do not find any difficulty in being involved in this national struggle because it is related to the Buddha Dharma and not merely a political question. Without freedom, the Buddhist teaching cannot be practiced and preserved. The last 30 years have proved this. So this is His Holiness speaking in the early 90s, I think. And since then, we can add another 30 years. A free Tibet is therefore very important for the preservation of these teachings, especially so since Buddhism has been practiced in Tibet in a very complete form. Helping this cause will indirectly serve the Buddha Dharma. So we do still have Buddhism in Tibet. It's been challenged a lot under the circumstances, and it continually, as many of us know, it continually gets challenged, suppressed, persecuted, but it's still there. Buddhism is taking hold in a small way in the modern world, but nothing compared to the way it, interestingly, has actually, you could say, survived in Tibet, but in a hidden way. So there are many, many, many great practitioners in Tibet. Lineages are being upheld. Practitioners are practicing discreetly, secretly, but there is a lot of suffering. And like His Holiness points out, the issue here is not really that Tibetans want particularly independence as such. They would just want the freedom to be able to practice the Buddha Dharma. And this again has been proposed by His Holiness again and again, and this has been ignored again and again. The issue for the Tibetans is just that they can practice their path. Even so, there have been times where things have been more lenient, and some temples are being, you could say, rebuilt in a small way. And so there is a continuity of Buddhism in Tibet. There's also places where the monasteries are really just showcases, museums, and it's just a complete charade where monks are sitting chanting, and you know, it's a charade. Anyway, His Holiness says, some of you here are actively defending the rights of Tibetan. I very much appreciate this and ask you to continue your support. I would like to thank you deeply on behalf of all those who live under constant fear and threat, and in the name of more than 1 million Tibetans who have disappeared as a result of this tragedy. So this is spoken in 1991, 30 years ago, and as of the last more than a decade now, we have more than 150 cases of self-immolations among the Tibetans. So it is something that, even though it doesn't have the presence in the media that it used to have, it's not that fashionable. It still continues. So please keep the Tibetan people in your mind, since we're now connecting with His Holiness's teaching here. Especially nowadays, where we're very concerned about the conflict over in Ukraine and Russia, we see so much sadness and so much brutality and so much tragedy there. So when we think of that, then we begin to really opens our eyes to what is taking place. So that's where we could also think of other places in which there is such suffering and has been such suffering now for many decades. So here we have this famous line of dedication: and now, as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, may I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world. The pains and sorrows of all wandering beings, may they ripen wholly on myself, and may the virtuous company of Bodhisattvas always bring about the happiness of beings. May the doctrine only cure for sorrow, source of every bliss and happiness, be blessed with wealth, upheld with veneration, and throughout a vast continuance of time endure. May bodhicitta precious and sublime arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen may it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore and more. So that brings our study to an end. I thought just to go over this, there was this tanka. Initially, somebody mentioned about this tanka, who the characters were in this tanka, and I sort of looked it up a little bit. Why you could say this is significant is because this is actually our heritage. Of course, we all have various heritages. We come from, we come from Denmark, Australia, England, France, America, and so forth. That's our karmic heritage. And we're very much at home in that culture. We've all read the books that's particular to our particularly sort of universal modern culture. We're sort of familiar with a lot of characters, from Abe Lincoln to President Kennedy to Charles de Gaulle to, the prime ministers in various places. The sort of the culture of sort of that surrounds us. There's a space of culture that we identify with and feel that we belong to this. So that's, of course, very valid. And this is what enables us to talk with others. So we should, of course, read the newspapers and read the books and see them, watch the movies, what have you. And all of that enables us to sort of understand the world the way other people see the world. But in terms of our lineage of what we're doing here with bodhicitta, it's quite significant actually to have some sense of those to whom we're indebted to, who not just struggled as ordinary persons, but actually penetrated to the very core of awakening. And so just a little bit about what we have here. This is, and very often we would see Shantideva portrayed in this way, if not mostly. He's portrayed levitating. So, usually you have great master sitting on a lion throne. In this case, you'll see there's a bit of distance between the seat and Shantideva. So he's the levitating one. We say as he began teaching the 9th chapter, he began to rise up like that. And we would say from the, I think, sloka 34 onwards, then one would only hear his voice. And above we have the Buddha. So of course, Shantideva and the rest of us, we're all indebted to the Buddha. And then there's the lineages that then come down from the Buddha, which are the lineages of Manjushri. You see here the dark brown to the Buddha's right. This is Manjushri. Should probably be red or orange. And over here we have, to the Buddha's left, we have the future Buddha, Maitreya. And so these two great bodhisattvas, they transmitted the Buddha's teachings in the case of down to Nagarjuna. So Nagarjuna became then the holder of the teachings that we refer to as the Prajnaparamita teachings, and also father of what we call the Madhyamika teachings, the middle way teachings. Actually, it wasn't the father, of course, the Buddha is the father of all these teachings, but Nagarjuna clarified this. And so we have actually a lineage of what we call the profound view. The profound lineage of view, which is then from Nagarjuna. And on the other hand, we have then down to Asanga. And many of you would remember the story about Asanga who meditated for 12 years. And he was sort of on the verge of giving up several times. And then he was inspired to re-enter his retreat, and eventually had a vision of the Buddha Maitreya. And we would say he received the teachings of Maitreya that are known as the five dharmas of Maitreya. And that's then with regards to Asanga, we talk about the lineage of vast action. So the teaching of Nagarjuna, they more highlight, you would say, the aspect of emptiness, the second turning of the wheel that really emphasizes the lack of inherent existence, the great openness that is the ultimate nature of reality. And Asanga's teachings from Maitreya, they highlight all the qualities of Buddha nature. So all the qualities that arise within this. This, you could say, is more the phenomenological aspect of enlightenment, how enlightenment plays out in terms of experience. So these two, they're equally valid. One is, you could say, the ontological or the actual reality of phenomena as it's expounded in the second turning of the wheel. And these are then the, you could say, the way in which this reality plays out. So particularly in the Nyingma tradition, we really would say these two approaches, the second and the third turning of the wheel, are equally the definitive, you could say, final word in terms of truth, but they sort of talk about different aspects of the awakened condition. So then what we have then from Nagarjuna is then someone who upheld Nagarjuna's teachings and taught them, Aryadeva here, Bhagwala, and then Chandrakirti here. Many of you would know from the Madhyamika Avatara teachings, the introduction to the middle way, Chandrakirti, Dao Dharma. And then we have someone who is a great logician. And this is quite important, actually. Logic is quite important because that's where we can validate what we're studying as proper knowledge. That's when we can see something is verifiable. And we say, oh yeah, that must be true. That is true. We can see it. So that's where this thing we call epistemology or logic and so forth, this is quite important, really, particularly in a modern context that we don't very often put Buddhism, for very many reasons, justifiably is understood as religion, but that's where the modern person very often thinks religion lacks that scientific foundation, the epistemic premise of verifiability, logic, something that actually is reflected as genuine and truthful. And that's where it doesn't help when you say it's true because it says so in our scriptures. It has to be true because we can verify and validate this in terms of certainly our experience. So that's where this is such an important aspect, really, of the Buddhist teaching. We call it pramana. So Dhammakirti was very important in that regard. And then down here we have Gunaprabha, who's a great holder of the Vinaya lineage. So over here we then have Maitreya, Asanga, and then we have Vasubandhu, who was actually Asanga's half-brother, and who became a holder of Asanga's teaching, but also very well known for his writings on Abhidharma. So we would say he initially was very much someone who came from the Sauchantika position of the Shravakayana, and then he converted to the Mahayana and upheld the lineage of his brother Asanga. And here we then have Chandragomin. I don't know a lot about Chandragomin. I know he and Chandrakirti, they had a debate that went for 7 years, and so Chandragomin was a layman. He lived outside Nalanda, and Chandrakirti was in there, but they would meet every once in a while and debate. This went on for a very long time. And then we have here Dignaga, who was also a logician. He actually precedes Dharmakirti. So he's the one who then was, you would say, one of the first Buddhists to really establish this branch of Buddhism we call pramana, or epistemology, logic. And then finally we had down here also another holder of the Vinaya, who was Shakyaprabha. So this is just a little bit about some of the important people in the Mahayana teaching. Now, this comes down to us, like I was saying, this is very much part of our heritage. And we're going to be starting a course tomorrow night, which actually will sum this up very beautifully in terms of how it comes down to us through in a work that's called Jamgun Mipam, His Life and Teachings, where the author, Douglas Duckworth, Professor Douglas Duckworth, he presents all of these teachings really that we have from the Indian tradition, how this comes down to Mipam Rinpoche, and this also informs, we might not be aware of it, but it very much informs the teachings that we receive in the Kagyu and Nyingma traditions. So, we receive a lot of teachings from, say, Tsongsa Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and we study teachings like this, and all of these actually have all the teachings we receive, they of course have this lineage, and so it's very valuable to see how Jamgun Mipam Rinpoche integrated and synthesized all these different teachings in a way that then applies to the practice that we're presently doing. If you have, sorry. If you have any questions, you're very welcome. And while I remember, so we're going to start a new study, the 30th of March. It will be the Sword of Wisdom. Again, something that brings together the teachings on Madhyamaka and Pramana, and actually something that very clearly enables us to understand again what we're doing. But this is from Mipam Rinpoche himself. So it's 104 verses. And we'll look at this through the commentary of the great Nyingma Khenpo, who lived in the States in his last years, Khenpo Shirapalden, and who was a very close student of Dudjom Rinpoche. So also this is something that it's written 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, 150 years ago maybe. Yeah, possibly. Anyway, it's very much part of, you could say, it's a modern classic in that sense. The Buddhist teaching, something that comes from a 19th century, we would refer to it as being modern. But it's something that really brings together, again, all the sort of valuable aspects in terms of the view. So very, very helpful with regards to our path. So anyway, that's starting the 30th of March. Next Wednesday is the anniversary of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, the 23rd of March. And so I've left that open because I think we might have a program. It's not announced yet. I think there are forces working on this program for that day. As some of you might know, recently a very, very great project was started, and not only it's a great project, but it's very capably handled. And it's an extraordinary team of translators and organizers, editors, and so on, who are working on translating all the works of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. So Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was a very great figure in Tibetan Buddhism, also in the 19th century. So he left a tremendous legacy, and his impact has been very great in terms of, say, upholding and spreading the Buddhist teaching down until the present day. So this is a great project, and it's one of these projects that like 84,000 be going on for quite a while, for decades to come. This team of translators, editors, and administrators and so on will be making all these translations available. But I think on the 23rd we'll begin to see, there'll be some revealing. We'll be able to see a little bit about what's happening with this. So so it'll be a great day. We'll do some practice, and particularly I think there'll be some people from there who will speak a bit about the project. So that's next Wednesday, March 23. Following that, then March 30, the Sword of Wisdom teaching begins. Yeah. Any questions? So what is it we say? Speech is silver, but silence is golden. So so few people are saying thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank all of you. You can probably guess, I'm a diehard, lifelong fundamentalist Buddhist. So me studying stuff like this is predictable. I think some of the rest of you actually fall into that category too. But anyway, to engage in Buddhist teaching is always expanding our horizons a bit. It's always, expanding our consciousness, and we're not doing drugs. It's a good thing. We're having insights that actually last. Not like we suddenly are going to have an insight that then sort of fades, but we're going to when we study, we substantiate our insight. So it's increased understanding of the value of compassion, increased understanding of the value of emptiness. And so when we study, we begin to, we of course know this already, but when we hear it presented from many different angles, it consolidates the value of what we're doing here. So it's always so good to enhance our practice and our path with study. Somebody like Dinghu Rinpoche, up until the end of his life, Rinpoche kept demonstrating the value of study through his example, continually receiving transmissions, continually looking through great works, and even the Rinpoche was regarded as a tuku, and he could have just hung out and just meditated and stayed in the hills in Tibet. He showed this, he demonstrated this path of actually listening to the Dharma and meditating on it. So this is significant for all of us who might not have the same, some of you might, but we might not have the same, you could say, predisposition that Dinghu Rinpoche had. So someone says, it's been so wonderful to deepen my understanding of this extraordinary text. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your teachings. Have good health and all the best. Thank you. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Yeah. If I dedicate to my sick mom, I feel it is based on the notion of I because she is my mom. Is such kind of dedication valid, or only the dedication to all sentient beings, which does not have the notion of mine? But we have connections with various sentient beings. We're going to have right now. We have a connection to some people who are our parents and our friends, but we're connected with all sentient beings. So right now we should take advantage that we have particular connections to certain people and certain friends and so on, and we should very much dedicate our merit to them. Of course, whenever we think of somebody or something, we shouldn't think, oh yeah, but I should be thinking of something else. Whenever the thought goes to, the people in Ukraine, the people in Russia, the people in wherever it might be, in Tibet and so on, or our family and whatever, we dedicate to them. Doesn't mean that we're not dedicating to other sentient beings as well, but we actually have a connection to particular people in this particular time, this lifetime, this set of circumstances. That's wonderful, and we should very much dedicate time to them. Could you comment on how the ethnicity of the different masters, how the Buddha's teaching catalyze flows of thought, travels of students and teachers, so amazing. Well, yes, we have of course these different masters here that we just discussed. They're primarily Indian, but what really signifies the Buddha's teaching is the skill with which the teaching then came down according to the particular circumstances. For example, Tralik Rinpoche, who lived and taught in Australia, so much, you could say, immersed himself in the culture and the language, and as such was able to present Buddhism within the modern context. And we see this with other teachers too, like Chögyam Trungpa and Songtse Gyalmen Khyentse Rinpoche and other teachers who are continually, you'd say, opening up and exposing themselves to and immersing themselves in culture. So the skillful means of language then is continually, you would say, adapted and readapted according to the circumstances. But of course, what is universal all along is then the elimination of confusion, duality, obscurations, and what is also universal is then the quality of compassion as it serves sentient beings. So that's where there's definitely an interesting way in which the Dharma travels. We can just rejoice in the way it adapts and is not held by, you could say, particular cultural or linguistic parameters. At the same time, also us who are heirs to this, it's also important for us to expand our mind and be able to hear and listen and study the classical teachings. You can see very often we can see how people miss out when they have this, oh yeah, that's so Tibetan, or that's so classical, or that's so Indian, then you can also see it comes at a price. It's a little bit this sort of village mentality of, oh, I'm just going to study what I can understand presently. We want to move the boundaries of what we can, because we live in a culture where enlightenment has not been understood, and so the language that we have right now is you could say the practice and the culture of enlightenment is still in its very infancy. So we're missing out hugely if we don't draw on if we can't extend beyond our own culture and our own language. All right, class. This being the last session, I guess we can end class early today. So, so we'll just conclude with dedication, further dedication. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. So thank you very much. And I'm sure we shall meet again. Take care. All the very best.